Hey, what's up? I'm Ginge. I'm going to take you through my first build. It's an AMD one. I'm basically a massive noob, so I'm going to be following VarietyBoxTV's videos on how to do it, and then I'll show you what I got first, and then I'll try and take it through. And anything I do wrong you can see, and anything that goes right you can also see. I'll show you the parts now.
Processor I got is an AMD FX8350 though, 8 core. Next up is the Hyper 212 Evo from Cooler Master. The motherboard is an ASRock 970 Extreme 4. Graphics card is an FFX Radeon HD 7950 3GB. The memory I'm using is Corsair Vengeance 16GB at 600 MHz. I'm using the FFX Pro 550 watt power supply. Hard drive I'm using is a Western Digital 1TB hard drive. I'm also using an SSD, the Samsung 830 series 64GB. I'm also using the cheapest CD/DVD drive that I find on PCPartPicker.com. Which peripherals I'm going to be using are the Microsoft Sidewinder X4 keyboard and the Razer deathadder mouse. And then I've also got Harmon Kardon 2.1 soundsticks 3, and I'm also using two IPS LCD monitors from LG, both 21.5 inch. The case I'm using is the Corsair 200R, Arctic Silver 5, and then other things as well include these. And also safety wise, I've also got an anti-static wristband. I got that off eBay for £2.99. First off, you got to put the wristband on and place it to something metal so you don't give off any static charge, so you don't fuck up your motherboard basically. Next thing there is to open up the motherboard. As you can see, I can take out all the crap like wires, leads and everything. There are the manuals and the installation guides, and that's the input-output plate that you need to replace on the case. We'll get to that later. I'm being very careful here taking out the motherboard. You don't need to be, although still be careful when taking it out, don't drop it or anything. But I was being a little bit too cautious at the time. It'd be my first time, building a PC together. As you can see, I'm also going to be using the box to put everything on to do an external test first before I put it into the case. I'm going to use the box because basically I didn't want to scratch the table that I was working on. And also, it's anti-static as well. You see that you don't want to place the motherboard on the anti-static bag because the outside is static, I believe. And then again, here I'm being very cautious, taking out the plastic foam when I shouldn't be, really. So there we have it. There's the motherboard set up. First thing then is to install the processor. AMDs are different to Intel. AMD uses the pins on the actual chip, whereas I think Intel does not. So you see it's in the bubble, or whatever it's called, casing, and it focuses on it shortly. And you can see all the pins there. You've got to be very careful not to bend the pins, otherwise you fuck up the processor. You see I'm looking down there, there should be a triangle in one of the corners, and there is little indentations on the placement where you meant to put it, so you can align up the processor and the processor slot. You put it in with no force. You see here? It just drops in like that, and at the time I didn't know if it had gotten in. I thought that was too easy for a processor, but apparently that was it. And then you just fold the lever arm down. As I said, I was going to install the Hyper 212 Evo for overclocking. I didn't plan on overclocking in the end. And be careful when taking the fan out, because otherwise you'll do this. I did cut myself while taking out the fan, so do be careful. The first thing when doing the Hyper 212 Evo, I have to take off the back plate of the motherboard, which I did not record, sorry about that. But then you have to put the Hyper 212 Evo back plate onto the motherboard. I had a bit of trouble getting this on. You gotta make sure it's tight, which was something I did not do. I was very loose with it put on first, and you'll see in the video earlier on that I do tighten it up with a thing that they include in the packaging. As I'm putting on the back plate, I'll line up the holes, and I'll line up the screws and nuts as well, as we're going to be tightening them on shortly. And make sure you do it diagonally, so you don't put too much pressure on one side of the board. It's the same as putting on strings of guitar if there are any musicians watching this. As you see there, I'm doing it there, doing it diagonally rather than two in one side, two on one parallel side, I should say, I think. As you see, I'm trying to tighten up screws by hand. Shortly in the video you will see me using a part that comes included in the packaging of the Hyper 212 Evo. See, I think it's done, but it's not. There's a small part. It's like an Allen key, not an Allen key. It's like a spanner that comes attached. You can see it there in the screwdriver that it easily attaches to the screwdriver. So there's no need to use a spanner basically, which could damage the motherboard if you slip off. Same with a screwdriver, you just gotta be very careful, but you can see a better picture there of it being put in, and that way they're all tight when it comes to putting in the heatsink. And as I show the camera, this is going to be putting in the heatsink at the time. This got me confused as where the actual X cross section bar was meant to go. I don't know where it goes, but there's a little thing in the middle that hits that there's an indentation in the metal block where you put it onto the CPU, which you put that in, if you get what I mean. So next step is to apply thermal paste. Just a small pea size will do. I may have put a little bit too much on there. And this is the part where I get wrong. I put it in the wrong place, and then for some stupid reason I try to think that this will work, this cross section will actually go onto the motherboard, when clearly it won't, but I still try. I get it wrong when I flip it round. I flip the actual heatsink round, and I place it. One thing I did not do, which I did not film while doing it now, is that you've got to squeeze the screws together to move them to fit onto the screws that are on your motherboard that you've just put on, because I didn't, and I was trying to, you see there, they're flicking up because they're at an angle. You want them vertically with the screws. You can see me trying to force them in. Bad maneuver on my part, a bad mistake on my part. But I corrected this later on when I wasn't filming. You can see it clearly on the left screw there. It's off center. You can clearly see that that's not meant to be. As you see now, I've put on the fan and I've connected it to a output on the next to the power supply plug input. Next we're going to install the memory, which is one of the easiest parts of the build. Basically take the memory out of this case, and you open up the latches on the motherboard, and you apply some force and then just push it in. You can hear there the little sound when it clicks in. That's when you know the memory is in. You see it from a better angle here. I flip over the latches. Look where the notch is in the center, so I know it's aligned properly, and then just give it some force and it'll click in. And there it is. Next we're going to put in the video card. As you see, I'm going to put it into the slot where the video card is meant to be. You'll see the notches. You'll see the notches on the memory card where it's meant to go, and then just push it lightly in, you feel the force, and I just clicked it in properly. Make sure it's hanging off the side so it doesn't push up when you're trying to push it down on the table. And this here I'm just showing you what plugs you're going to need to put into the memory card, into the video card to test it. I put only in one in first, don't do that. And I connect it up to a monitor setup just to give it a test run. And you can see I've also connected the power supply, which, if you've got the FX 550 power supply, is ridiculous. There's too many leads for it and you cannot unconnect them. It is really annoying, and that's a disadvantage that I find with the power supply. External build went fine, I did not show it on camera, but here we open up the Corsair case. It's all non-screws, the only thing you have to screw in is in the motherboard. As you can see that they've given you screws to deal with in the little box. That's in the hard drive slot. Next then you put in the power supply first. A little bit of trouble, again these leads are just a massive annoyance. And it was a little bit tricky getting the power supply in because there's a slot. There's a piece of metal that sticks out from the case. It's a little bit tight, but it does go in properly. Here it is. I'm just focusing there with the hand flash, and then I'm just installing the power supply in with the screws provided in the box by Corsair. Screws are going to need it for the power supply and the motherboard. Excellent, all done. So I take off the front panel of the CD DVD writer, and it's just a simple push in. And with the Corsair 200R case, you got to flick a little. And with the Corsair 200R case, you got to flick a little bit of metal to make sure it's secure in the slot that it's meant to go in. Next, we're going to put in the Samsung SSD. It's very simple. Again, it's just pushing it in, and with the SSD, you know, I didn't think it was in there, and then just push in more, and it's locked in place. Then to unlock it, you just flick another little bit of plastic out, and it unlocks it. Now with the same with the mechanical hard drive, you line it up with what you meant to do, and then you slot it in. Unfortunately, on here I actually turned it around because the cable management's better when I thread the leads through the other way, so I did it on the other side. As you see there, I tapped the input-output plate, I switched that over. Do that before you put in the motherboard, otherwise you have to take the motherboard out first and then switch it back in. Don't do that. Basically, I lined up the motherboard then with there's a little pin sticking out of the Corsair 200R case that you've got to put through a hole in the motherboard. Be careful if you've got the ASRock 970 Extreme 4 motherboard and the Corsair 200R case, because you have to remove one screw so that it doesn't short circuit the motherboard. You'll have to check which motherboard you got and then remove which screws are necessary. With me on the Corsair 200R case, it was only one. And then you find me with the part where now I'm just screwing in the motherboard. Again, if you've got the same case and same motherboard, be careful with the Hyper 212 Evo, because it causes an annoyance when trying to screw in the last screw in at the top. And here I am just connecting the fans up to the motherboard. Do a little bit of cable management, feeding them from behind. Obviously my first build and it's not very good. And I am just connecting up the HDD, LED, you know, the reset button, all that. I'm just trying to feed it and make it look a little bit nicer. And the USB, well, the front USB headers on the front of the case. And sorry for the angles of hair, but I'll zoom in and show you what I'm just doing. You see I've also got the power supply connected up top there. That's USB 3.0 header on the thing, on the front of the PC, on the bottom, and then up top is the power supply to the main motherboard, I think. The 12 volt one, I believe. It's just showing what's inside and what everything's all connected. You see I've connected up the SATA 6GB data cables up to the CD drive up there. And there's the SSD, and then you'll see I flipped the mechanical and it's coming in from the back there. It still looks a bit messy. There's just so many wiring on there's so much wiring on the power supply, it was ridiculous. It was just really annoying that you can't disconnect different wires from the power supply. It would have made it much cleaner on the back, and cable management wise as well, it would have been nicer. There we go, ladies and gentlemen, that is everything done. First off, I'd like to say that, thank you to the subreddit on Reddit, rbuilderpc. I'd like to say thank you to the members on that, especially razdabes, tool_bright_stranger, ptboo, nerd_gizm, and shiv1997, and on Tom's Hardware Forum, Iceclock and Zered619. So thank you to those guys for helping me pick the right parts here, and I've edited this video on the computer I'm using and it's running smoothly. As you can see, I'm chucking in a few camera shots with the new camera just to see what I can do. And it's looking quite nice, I feel. Although I do need a much bigger desk, but I have a small room, so it's hard to fit everything on. But as you see, Windows 7 is running nicely. I was using a compact NC6320 laptop, which is 8 years old, actually coming up to 9 years old now, so it's a much needed replacement. Thank you all for watching, catch you guys later.